The acrid smoke of burning villages drifted across the French countryside as Captain Lloyd Williams of the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, received the order that would echo through history. It was June 1st, 1918, and the German spring offensive had pushed Allied forces to the brink of collapse. General Erich Ludendorff's massive assault, dubbed Operation Michael, had carved a bloody path toward Paris, leaving seasoned French and British troops reeling in retreat. Retreat? Hell, we just got here! Williams reportedly barked at a French officer who suggested the Americans fall back with the decimated French Fourth Army. The Marine captain's defiant words would become legendary, embodying the spirit that was about to transform America's reputation on the global battlefield. The village of Château-Thierry had fallen just days earlier, and German forces now controlled a salient that brought their artillery within striking distance of the French capital. Kaiser Wilhelm II's armies had come closer to Paris than at any point since the opening months of the war in 1914. The situation appeared desperate as General Max von Bain's 7th Army prepared for what many believed would be the final push to end the Great War in Germany's favor. Into this maelstrom stepped the United States 2nd Division, a force that combined regular Army units with the battle-hungry Marines of the 4th Brigade. These Americans had crossed the Atlantic with dreams of glory, but few understood the industrialized horror that awaited them in the wheat fields and dense forests of the Marne sector. The Marines, in particular, carried themselves with a swagger that annoyed their European allies, seasoned veterans who had endured 4 years of unprecedented carnage. Brigadier General James Harbord commanded the Marine Brigade with the stern confidence of a man who understood that his forces carried the weight of American military credibility. The United States had been in the war for barely over a year, and European skeptics questioned whether these fresh-faced Americans possessed the stomach for modern warfare's brutal realities. According to contemporary accounts from the New York Times battlefield correspondents, the Marines' arrival at Château-Thierry created an immediate stir among French civilians who had grown accustomed to seeing their own soldiers in retreat. These tall Americans, many still teenagers from farms and cities across the continent, marched with a precision that reminded observers of parade grounds rather than battlefields. The German High Command had calculated that their spring offensive would conclude the war before American reinforcements could tip the balance. General Ludendorff had gambled everything on this final throw of the dice, knowing that each passing month brought thousands more American soldiers to European shores. Time was running out for the Central Powers, and the window for decisive victory was closing rapidly. As Marine units took positions along the Paris-Metz highway, they faced across no man's land toward Belleau Wood, a roughly square-mile forest that bristled with German machine gun nests and artillery positions. The wood appeared deceptively peaceful from a distance, its ancient oak and beech trees showing the first full green of early summer. Few Americans realized they were staring at what would become their generation's defining crucible. The stage was set for a battle that would either validate American military power or expose it as hollow boasting. In the forests and fields around Belleau Wood, the fate of American prestige hung in the balance. Dawn on June 6, 1918, brought with it the thunderous roar of German artillery as General Oskar von Hutier's 18th Army launched a renewed assault toward the Marne River. The bombardment shook the earth with such violence that American Marines crouched in their hastily dug positions felt their teeth rattle in their skulls. This was the opening movement of what would become known as the Battle of Belleau Wood. Though few participants that morning understood, they were witnessing the birth of American military legend. Colonel James Harbord's Marine Brigade had spent the previous night digging in along a defensive line that stretched from Triangle Farm to the village of Bourèche. The Marines had never faced the concentrated firepower of German machine gun battalions, and their baptism would prove both brutal and enlightening. Veteran Sergeant Dan Daly, a 2-time Medal of Honor recipient who had fought in China and Haiti, moved among his men with the calm demeanor of a professional warrior. The German forces opposing them belonged to the elite 10th Division and elements of the 47th Reserve Division, battle-hardened units that had learned their deadly craft on the eastern and western fronts. These soldiers had perfected the art of defensive warfare, turning Belleau Wood into a labyrinth of interlocking fields of fire that could shred attacking infantry with methodical precision. As reported in contemporary dispatches from the Associated Press, the first American assault waves discovered the horrifying reality of modern warfare when they advanced across open ground toward German positions. The distinctive chatter of Maxim machine guns cut down Marines with mechanical efficiency, teaching harsh lessons about tactics that European armies had learned through years of bloody experience. Private First Class Carl Brannan of the 6th Marines later wrote in his memoir about the surreal experience of watching comrades disappear in clouds of red mist as German gunners found their range. The romantic notions of warfare that many Americans had carried across the Atlantic evaporated in minutes of concentrated fire that turned the wheat fields into a carpet of fallen Marines. Yet something remarkable began to emerge from this chaos. Rather than breaking under the unprecedented pressure, Marine units demonstrated an adaptability that impressed even their skeptical French allies. Small unit leaders like Sergeant Major John Quick began improvising tactical solutions, using natural terrain features and coordinated fire to suppress German positions. The Americans were learning, and they were learning quickly. The battle for Hill 142, a modest elevation overlooking the southern edge of Belleau Wood, became a microcosm of the larger struggle. Marine companies attacked repeatedly throughout the day, each assault teaching valuable lessons about the relationship between firepower and movement. Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Wise's 3rd Battalion suffered enormous casualties but refused to yield ground, establishing a pattern of tenacious determination that would define American performance throughout the campaign. By evening, both sides had learned respect for their opponents. German commanders reported to their superiors that these American Marines fought with a ferocity that reminded them of their own stormtroopers, while French observers noted with surprise that the supposedly inexperienced Americans had adapted to trench warfare conditions with remarkable speed. The cost had been terrible. Marine casualties for the day exceeded 400 men, a number that shocked American commanders who had expected lighter losses in their first major engagement. Yet the Marines held their positions, and more importantly, they had demonstrated to friend and foe alike that American forces possessed the fighting spirit necessary for modern warfare. As darkness fell over the contested ground, both armies prepared for the prolonged struggle that lay ahead. The morning of June 10, 1918, found Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Joseph Daly crouched in a shell hole barely 50 yards from German positions in Belleau Wood. Around him, the remnants of his company from the 73rd Machine Gun Company prepared for what every man knew might be their final assault. The 44-year-old sergeant had already earned 2 medals of honor in distant corners of the American Empire, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the industrial-scale carnage of the Western Front. The German defenders had transformed Belleau Wood into a fortress of interlocking machine gun nests, each position carefully sited to provide mutual support. The 46th and 47th Reserve Regiments had spent months fortifying every clearing, every fallen log, every rocky outcrop. Their Maxim guns commanded fields of fire that turned the forest floor into a killing ground, where movement meant death. Colonel James Harbord's orders were simple in concept, but hellish in execution. Clear the wood of German forces and establish American control over this vital terrain feature. The Marines would advance through nearly a square mile of dense forest, rooting out defenders who knew every tree and stone. It was exactly the type of close-quarters fighting that favored the defensive. Yet Harbord believed his Marines possessed the individual initiative necessary to overcome German advantages. As the preparatory artillery barrage lifted, Daly rose from his position and surveyed the young faces around him. Many of these Marines were barely out of their teens, farm boys from Iowa and factory workers from Detroit, who had never imagined they would die in a French forest. The sergeant major understood that leadership in such moments came not from elaborate speeches, but from personal example. "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?" Daly reportedly shouted as he led his men into the green hell of Belleau Wood. His words, recorded by multiple witnesses and later reported in Stars and Stripes military newspaper, became one of the war's most famous battle cries. The psychological impact of veteran leadership at the critical moment cannot be overstated in explaining American success during this phase of the battle. The fighting that followed defied conventional military description. In the dense undergrowth, combat devolved into a series of individual duels between Marines and German soldiers, who sometimes fired at each other from distances measured in feet rather than yards. The forest canopy blocked artillery support and made coordinated movement nearly impossible, forcing both sides to rely on small unit tactics and personal courage. Private Elton Mackin of the 5th Marines later described the surreal experience of hunting German machine gunners through woods where every shadow might conceal death. The Marines advanced by fire and movement, with individual squads providing covering fire while their comrades maneuvered against specific targets. It was exhausting, terrifying work that demanded constant vigilance and split-second decision-making. German resistance proved both fierce and professional. The defenders had prepared multiple fallback positions throughout the wood, allowing them to conduct a fighting withdrawal that inflicted maximum casualties on their attackers. Each machine gun nest had to be flanked and assaulted individually, a process that consumed precious time and irreplaceable men. By midday, Marine casualties had reached alarming proportions, but the attack continued to make progress. Small groups of Marines had penetrated deep into the German position, severing communication lines and creating confusion in the enemy rear areas. The momentum was shifting, though at a cost that would have broken less determined units. The Germans began to realize they were facing a qualitatively different opponent than they had encountered before, soldiers who combined American individual initiative with growing tactical sophistication. The afternoon of June 12, 1918, witnessed scenes of carnage that would haunt survivors of Belleau Wood for the remainder of their lives. Major John Arthur Hughes of the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, counted fewer than 200 effective fighters, remaining from his original complement of nearly 1,000 men. The forest floor was carpeted with the bodies of Marines and German soldiers locked in death's embrace, testament to fighting so close and personal that opposing forces sometimes died with their hands around each other's throats. Corporal Carl Andrew Brannan moved through the undergrowth like a ghost, his rifle ready for the split-second encounters that characterized combat in the dense woods. The 19-year-old from Mississippi had learned to read the forest's deadly signs. The unnatural stillness that indicated a hidden machine gun nest, the subtle movement that betrayed a sniper's position, the metallic click of a rifle bolt that meant immediate danger. These skills, acquired through brutal experience, separated the living from the dead in Belleau Wood's green maze. The German defenders, primarily from the 2nd Battalion of the 461st Infantry Regiment, had established their positions with typical Prussian thoroughness. Every clearing had been pre-registered for artillery and mortar fire, every approach route covered by interlocking fields of observation and fire. Lieutenant Colonel Ernst Otto, commanding the German garrison, understood that holding Belleau Wood was crucial to maintaining the entire salient threatening Paris. Captain Alphonse de Carré of the French 6th Army had positioned his artillery observers where they could direct supporting fires into the forest, but the close-quarters nature of the fighting made such support extremely dangerous to friendly forces. According to battlefield reports preserved in the French National Archives, the distinction between American and German positions often measured mere yards, making artillery coordination a nightmare of precise timing and communication. The Marines adapted their tactics with the fluid improvisation that would become their trademark. Sergeant Major John Henry Quick organized small hunter-killer teams that specialized in stalking German machine gun positions. These teams moved through the woods with the patience of experienced woodsmen, sometimes spending hours maneuvering into position for a single, decisive assault on an enemy strongpoint. Private First Class Marvin Simmons from Texas discovered that his childhood experience hunting deer in East Texas forests translated directly to hunting German soldiers in French woods. The same skills that had put meat on his family's table now kept him alive in combat where survival often depended on who spotted whom first. His success in eliminating enemy snipers earned him the nickname Deadeye among his squad mates. The psychological strain of forest fighting began to tell on both sides. The inability to see more than a few yards in any direction created a constant state of nervous tension that exhausted men as thoroughly as physical exertion. Every rustling leaf might herald an attack. Every snapping branch could indicate enemy movement. Sleep became impossible, and men fought on reserves of adrenaline and determination that seemed inexhaustible. German prisoners captured during this phase of the battle expressed amazement at American tenacity. According to interrogation reports filed with the American Expeditionary Forces Intelligence Section, veteran German soldiers compared Marine fighting spirit favorably to their own elite stormtrooper units. This professional recognition represented a significant shift in European perceptions of American military capability. The village of Bourèche, strategically positioned on the eastern edge of Belleau Wood, became a secondary focus of Marine assault operations. The 96th Company, 6th Marines, launched a series of coordinated attacks against German positions in the village, fighting house to house in brutal urban combat that previewed battles yet to come in the war's final months. By evening, neither side could claim decisive victory, but the character of both armies had been forever changed by the day's fighting. The dawn of June 15, 1918, revealed the true cost of America's baptism of fire in Belleau Wood. Medical corpsmen like hospital apprentice John Balk moved through the forest collecting wounded Marines who had lain among the dead for hours, sometimes days. The sight of young Americans torn apart by machine gun fire and artillery fragments would remain seared in the memories of those who survived. A generation of men who learned that glory came wrapped in unimaginable suffering. Major Thomas Holcomb, commanding the 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines, faced a decision that epitomized the brutal mathematics of modern warfare. His unit had captured approximately 60% of Belleau Wood, but his effective strength had fallen below 200 men from an original battalion of over 800. The question was whether to consolidate gains or press forward with depleted forces against German positions that remained formidably defended. First Sergeant William Francis Murray had served with the Marines in the Philippines and understood that battles were ultimately won by small groups of determined men at critical moments. His leadership of 3rd Platoon, 78th Company during the assault on Hill 141 demonstrated the quality of non-commissioned officer leadership that gave American forces their tactical edge. Murray's ability to inspire exhausted Marines to continue attacking against overwhelming odds represented the human factor that no amount of planning could duplicate. The German High Command, monitoring the battle through regular reports from General Max von Bain's 7th Army headquarters, began to reassess their evaluation of American fighting capabilities. Intelligence estimates filed with the German General Staff acknowledged that Marine units were performing at levels comparable to elite European formations, despite their relative inexperience in large-scale combat operations. According to dispatches published in the Chicago Tribune and preserved in the newspaper archive, American casualties at Belleau Wood had reached staggering proportions. The 2nd Division alone had suffered over 9,000 casualties, with the Marine Brigade bearing the heaviest losses. These numbers shocked American civilians who had expected their involvement in the European war to be brief and decisive. Captain Clifton Bledsoe Cates, commanding the 96th Company, 6th Marines, embodied the determination that characterized American performance throughout the campaign. Despite being wounded 3 times during the fighting, Cates refused evacuation and continued to lead his dramatically reduced company in assault after assault against German positions. His leadership earned him the Navy Cross and the undying respect of his men. The tactical lessons learned at Belleau would influence American military doctrine for generations. The effectiveness of small unit leadership, the importance of individual marksmanship, and the value of aggressive assault tactics all emerged from the crucible of forest fighting. Marine Corps schools would study these engagements for decades, extracting principles that would guide future operations in conflicts yet to come. French Marshal Ferdinand Foch, Allied Supreme Commander, personally visited Marine positions on June 16th to assess American performance. His subsequent report to the Allied High Command praised the magnificent fighting spirit of American forces and recommended their immediate expansion within the Allied order of battle. This professional recognition from Europe's most respected military leader represented a watershed moment in American military history. The village of Bourèche finally fell to Marine assault on June 16th, after house-to-house fighting that reduced much of the community to rubble. The capture of this strategic position effectively completed the encirclement of remaining German forces in Belleau, though isolated pockets of resistance would continue fighting for several more days. By June 20th, organized German resistance in Belleau had largely ceased, though scattered sniper teams and machine gun crews continued to exact a toll on unwary Marines. The morning of June 26, 1918, brought an unusual quiet to Belleau as the last German defenders evacuated their positions under cover of darkness. Major Maurice Shearer of the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, cautiously advanced through sectors that had cost hundreds of American lives to secure, his Marines moving with the hard-earned caution of veterans who had learned to respect their enemy's capabilities. The silence felt almost supernatural after weeks of constant gunfire and artillery bombardment. Brigadier General James Harbord received the honor of sending one of the war's most famous messages to divisional headquarters. "Wood's now U.S. Marine Corps entirely." These simple words, transmitted via field telephone at 11:45 on the morning of June 26th, marked not only the end of a brutal campaign, but the birth of American military credibility on the world stage. The message would be reprinted in newspapers across America and quoted in military histories for generations to come. The strategic implications of American success at Belleau extended far beyond the capture of a single square mile of French forest. General Erich Ludendorff's Spring Offensive, which had brought German forces within striking distance of Paris, had been definitively halted. More importantly, the German High Command now understood that American reinforcements represented a qualitative as well as quantitative threat to their strategic position. Captain John Wainwright Thomason of the 5th Marines, who would later achieve fame as a military historian and artist, recognized immediately that his unit had participated in something historically significant. His sketches and written accounts, preserved in the Marine Corps Historical Center, captured both the horror of forest fighting and the pride that Marines felt in their unprecedented achievement. Thomason understood that Belleau would become a sacred name in Marine Corps tradition. The French government's response to American success proved equally significant in establishing the battle's legendary status. On June 30th, General Henri-Philippe Pétain issued orders officially renaming Belleau as Bois de la Brigade de Marine, in honor of the American forces who had captured it. This unprecedented gesture by the French military recognized the Marines' achievement in terms that European armies reserved for their own elite formations. According to contemporary reports in the Times of London, archived in the British National Archives, European military observers were particularly impressed by the Marines' tactical adaptability during the campaign. Professional soldiers, who had dismissed American forces as enthusiastic amateurs, acknowledged that the fighting at Belleau Wood demonstrated sophisticated small-unit tactics and individual initiative that compared favorably with veteran European formations. The cost had been enormous. The 4th Marine Brigade suffered 55% casualties during the 3-week campaign, losses that would have rendered most units combat ineffective. Yet the Marines had not only held their positions, but had successfully executed complex offensive operations against determined resistance. This combination of heavy casualties and tactical success puzzled European observers who had learned to expect one or the other, but rarely both. German prisoners interrogated after the battle provided intelligence that confirmed the strategic impact of American success. Members of elite units like the 4th Guards Division reported declining morale among German forces who had previously considered American troops inferior opponents. The psychological effect of facing Americans who fought with unexpected skill and determination began to influence German tactical planning throughout the Western Front. The domestic American reaction proved equally significant in establishing the battle's place in national memory. Newspaper coverage, exemplified by reports in the New York Herald and preserved in the Library of Congress archives, presented Belleau Wood as proof that American forces could match European armies in combat effectiveness. This validation of American military power had profound implications for the nation's emerging role as a global power. The Marines had earned something more precious than tactical victory. They had earned the respect of the world's professional military establishments. The aftermath of Belleau Wood resonated through military establishments across the globe as professional soldiers reassessed their understanding of American fighting capabilities. General Erich von Falkenhayn, architect of the Verdun offensive and one of Germany's most respected strategists, filed a confidential report with the German General Staff acknowledging that American forces had demonstrated combat effectiveness comparable to our own elite formations. This admission from a Prussian military intellectual represented a seismic shift in European military thinking. The legend of the Devil Dogs emerged from German soldiers' accounts of fighting Marines in Belleau Wood, though the exact origin of this nickname remains disputed among military historians. German prisoners consistently described their American opponents as fighting with a ferocity that reminded them of legendary hounds of hell from Germanic folklore. Whether the term Teufelhunden was actually used by German troops or created by American propaganda remains unclear, but the nickname captured the psychological impact that Marine performance had on enemy morale. Colonel James Harbord's promotion to command the 2nd Division represented official recognition of his leadership during the Belleau Wood campaign, but more significantly, it demonstrated American military competence at the senior command level. European allies had consistently questioned whether American officers possessed the experience necessary to command large formations in modern warfare. Harbord's success proved that American military education and training could produce leaders capable of competing with European professionals. The tactical innovations developed during forest fighting at Belleau Wood influenced American military doctrine well beyond the Great War's conclusion. The Marine Corps schools at Quantico began incorporating lessons learned from small unit operations in dense terrain, emphasizing individual marksmanship, fire and movement techniques, and decentralized command structures. These doctrinal changes would prove crucial in later conflicts from Guadalcanal to Vietnam, where American forces again faced the challenge of fighting in restrictive terrain against determined opponents. According to contemporary analysis published in Jane's Fighting Ships and preserved in the Royal Naval College archives, the Belleau Wood campaign marked the emergence of American expeditionary forces as a global factor in military planning. British and French strategists began incorporating American capabilities into long-term assessments of global power balances, recognizing that the United States had developed military forces capable of projecting power beyond North American borders. The human cost of establishing American military credibility remained staggering. The 2nd Division's casualties during the Belleau Wood campaign exceeded 9,000 men, with Marine Brigade losses approaching 60% of original strength. These numbers represented more than statistical abstractions. They embodied the price paid by young Americans to establish their nation's military reputation on the world stage. Every casualty represented a family destroyed, a community diminished, a generation scarred by industrial warfare's unprecedented brutality. First Sergeant Dan Daly's Congressional Medal of Honor recommendation, though ultimately unsuccessful, symbolized official recognition of the individual heroism that characterized American performance throughout the campaign. Daly's leadership during the critical assault phase demonstrated that American non-commissioned officers possessed the tactical competence and personal courage necessary to succeed in modern warfare. His example inspired countless Marines who would carry forward the traditions established in Belleau Wood. The strategic consequences extended far beyond immediate tactical success. German military planning for the remainder of 1918 incorporated realistic assessments of American fighting capabilities, leading to more cautious operational approaches and ultimately contributing to Germany's decision to seek an armistice. The psychological impact of American success at Belleau Wood rippled through German civilian morale, as reports of elite American formations began appearing in German newspapers despite censorship efforts. The transformation was complete. American forces had entered Belleau Wood as an unknown quantity in global military calculations and emerged as a recognized power whose capabilities commanded respect from friend and foe alike. The Marines who survived that bloody forest had written their names in military history, establishing traditions of excellence that would endure through generations of future conflicts. Their legacy lived on in the simple truth that American military power had been tested in the crucible of modern warfare and had not been found wanting.